This is the first ever webcast from FilmLab Nigeria. How situations is all over the world. And today we're going to interview somebody, a very renowned fine artist who is combining filmmaking and actually created an art that is unique to himself. He calls himself a surrealist. I'm speaking with Stanlee Ohikhuare. Sorry, correct me. I usually your surname.
Ohikhuare.
Ohikhuare. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're speaking with Mr. Stanlee Ohikhuare, and this guy is big, but he's humble. May I quote you? You said, "I prefer the simple, unassuming, and responsible lifestyle that has constantly projected me just the way I am. I want to remain all that people see right at the surface. No layers, no exoskeletal structure." When you use words like exoskeletal structure, what do you mean? What do you mean by this?
It just means no appendages, nothing beyond what you see.
That seems to put in a class of a celebrity that you are trying to escape from.
Nice of you.
So, Mr. Stanlee, you're welcome. Like I said, I'm interviewing Mr. Stanlee. I don't want to go so far. We're going to be talking about, we're going to be evaluating Nigerian culture, Nigerian film culture in story directions. We're going to be also situating story directions in global social discourse. What I mean by those two things is that we need, from my perception, I don't know if you perceive so, to rejig Nigeria's film story directions. Again, in doing so, situate it within global, situation. We need to start talking about, global issues in Nigerian movies, not only in Nigeria. So, but let me ask you a question. You call yourself, every movie that I will watch that is being produced by or been directed and shot by you or done anything by you, will always have the ending cinematography. Why are you so obsessed with the word cinematography?
Well, it's not an obsession. It's the job. I'm a trained fine artist, and a cinematographer is essentially the painter on a film set. You understand? So if you ask me to define cinematography, I'll say it's the painting of the visual elements that you see on screen. That's what we call the mise en scene in the movie, And these elements include light, form, space. In film, these elements are set in motion through captured light that is reflected electronically or through an image sensor onto a camera. And then the person who's responsible for bringing all these elements together and painting a wholesome picture that is pleasant to the eye and that conveys the story is the cinematographer. Unfortunately, I'm a painter. So again, it's the one way that I can use my primary training as a fine artist to impart on film.
And very impressive, because I've looked at the scenes in your movies, the short movies that I've watched. They're so complex. You could see, it's like staring at, that kind of board behind you, so complex, so deep, so varied. I don't know. How do you go about painting? Let me use the word scenes.
Well, it's the same way. Yeah, when you have a plain canvas in front of you as a fine artist, as a painter, when you have a canvas in front of you, when you've mixed your paint and your colors and your palette, and you have your brushes and your palette knives and your everything to create this painting, what you want to start doing is, you must actually always start with a vision. You have this image at the back of your mind that you're trying to bring to life. And so what you begin to do is that you begin to uh, bring those images together you bring them in terms of shades and tonal variations and tonal gradations. And then as an artist, there's always a style to art. Personally, I'm a Baroque artist. Baroque artists are known for high contrast images.
Because
Yeah.
if you listen to Baroque music too, there's a lot of complexity in rhythms.
Exactly. Yeah. So Baroque artists are known for high contrasty images, you understand? And in filmmaking, that's what you call low key lighting, you understand? So again, I'm a fan of low key lighting because it's more cinematic, it has less contrast, and it just feels visually appealing to the eye. So again, when you look at it from that background, as a Baroque artist, what you're trying to do is use the interplay of light and darkness, something that's called chiaroscuro in art, to make images pop out and to create this volume in the space around you. It's the same thing I try to do with my films through the lighting design and with the cinematography.
As an artist, I can see all that you've done on your scenes, and your scenes are always the reality, realization of your imaginations as an artist. Now, that to me is surrealism. As you rightly called yourself a surrealist, can you explain to the common man or to the layman or to the lay artist what surrealism is all about?
Okay, so a surrealist is essentially an innate artist. When I say an innate artist, I mean someone who's born an artist. And you realize that there are so many people in society who are not essentially trained artists, but they are innate artists. That means they have arts inborn in them, and they have the talent, they have the gift. And a surrealist is someone who operates outside the confines of popular norms. He's not confined to what the stereotypes that every other person is confined to. You understand? And when you approach art from a strict art background and implement it in filmmaking, you have a filmmaker who's an artist and is also bringing the surrealist influence into it. Because first of all, art is created from uh, a functional perspective. The art that was created in the past, where you say African art, ancient art, they were all functional arts. Man needed to have communication with higher deities, higher beings. And so they started to create forms through which they could communicate with these higher deities, gods, and that's the first thing that necessitated art. And if you go back to history, from the Egyptians, and let's even come close back down home to where I'm from. I'm from Edo State. The Benin people, the art in the society in Benin back in the day was more important than so many other things. They used art to chronicle their history. They used art as ancestral items to relate with the dead. They use art to relate with the spirit world. And in fact, at the end of the day, you realize that if you stick to the functionality of art and put it above the commerciality of it, you realize that every person who's actually practicing art from the standpoint of functionality is actually drawn to surrealism. Now let's go back to the first guys who started surrealism, Andre Breton. Andre Breton, he started this movement. He started this
He
movement.
was an artist.
Well, he was a writer. He was a writer. Yeah, he was a writer. He started this movement it was more like a revolution. Just that was during the World War, you understand. And he started as a revolution because then you had like Paris and France and everywhere, everybody was just so ideal, and there were societal norms and everything was so dictated. And these guys realized that, with a war coming upon the world like this, it shows that things can't always remain the way they are dictated. So people should learn to think outside the norms and to employ new ways of thinking beyond what your conscious mind can provide. And so they realize that the subconscious mind can actually create more solutions that are more enduring than the conscious mind. And so when people like Andre Prenter went out there and started this release, and he had this manifesto which he published, and years down the line, a young artist called Salvador Dali latched into it, and it became something not just for writers. And then that's where the artists came into the picture. You understand? And at the end of the day, realized that Salvador Dali single-handedly took the movement beyond what the writers could do, and he became like the poster boy for surrealism. And personally, as a surrealist, it was my encounter with when I was in Yabatech. I used to make out time to go to the library to read, just so I could be ahead of my peers and to find out new things. And then I stumbled upon this book by Salvador Dali. It was like his biography.
And it became your major influence.
Look, I just saw my future. I saw myself in the books,
Uh,
and the kind of images I was seeing there. I was seeing, I would just say I saw familiar images, because surrealism is about the world of dreams and fantasies, and I'm someone who I dwell a lot in that realm uh,
you dream
of the
about
subconscious, exactly.
okay.
And then I was seeing an artist who was creating images that looked like the kind of images in my head. And then I didn't even know what true realism was. But then I studied it myself and I told myself, you know what? This is all I'm going to be. Since there are people who are practicing this the way it is, I'm going to do it. And back then, I never knew I was going to become a filmmaker. An
And
interest.
I was going to ask you if something like David Lynch ever, because who's known to be a surrealist, in filmmaking industry for a long
Yeah.
time, I was going to ask you if he has been in any way an influence on you or any other surrealist filmmaker has been an influence on you.
Well, the thing is that David Lynch himself was influenced by Salvador Dali.
Okay.
During the World War, a lot of the surrealists they disbanded. Some of them went to the U.S., some went to Mexico. They were fleeing the war, and then they brought this movement to the U.S. So David Lynch was influenced by Salvador Dali and his likes, and then Salvador Dali created a couple of movies. You should see the movies. In fact, there's a 1945 movie that was a collaboration between Salvador Dali and Walt Disney, but it was never completed. It was only completed in 2013. Was it 2013 or 2003? Yeah, 2013, I think so. And they finally made it with Disney, and it just shows you that the guy was thinking ahead of his time. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And there's a movie he made which is called Unchained Andalou. I think it was in 1929. If you watch that movie, you understand why I say that even Lynch was inspired by Dali. Dali just lived ahead of his time, and he did. When they made that movie, they wanted to make a movie that made no sense because it was surrealism at that point in time was more like opposing the norms. They wanted to make a movie that made no sense, but at the end of the day, it was highly acclaimed, and they were very disappointed that everybody liked it because all they did were they pieced together images from their dreams and nightmares and imaginations and hallucinations. In fact, it was common for the early surrealists to induce themselves into a uh, transcendental states like as if they are asleep so they are not fully conscious so that they could tap into whatever their minds had to offer beyond what the physical had to offer to them. And again, you realize that when they made that stuff, you should actually check that out on Chen Andalou, I think so, yeah, 1929. And there's a popular scene there where they used a blade to cut a lady's eye, and then the fluid from the eye comes out. And people, for so many years, there was a question like, how did they achieve that shot? Only for people to realize later that what they actually did was to take a dead calf and then they scraped the fur from the body around the eyes to make it match the lady's face, and then it was the eyeball of that calf. So you see, a lot of crazy things. So the surrealists were all about creating alternative realities, alternative realities of things. But again, the origins of surrealism
I have
were about revolution.
okay. I have watched Nollywood movies for so long as I have. It has been a formidable industry all over the world. But why is it that they can't surreal some scenes like the Babalawo scenes, like but sometimes you go to find that in Yoruba films where they try to surreal what is actually the actuality and the spirituality. In your
Yeah,
So how influential can somebody like you become a bridge between commercial filmmaking and arts, film?
well, it's if you look at it, anytime anybody wants to depict something as out of this world, the most effective or effectual way to have that communication, visual communication, would be through surrealism. You understand? Because it's visual storytelling. It's not about what people say. Personally, I'm not a talking head kind of person. So as much as possible,
Yeah,
I reduce.
I noticed that in your movies, people have this use dialogue.
Yeah, I don't. The trouble about it is that if the dialogue is not going to move the story forward, then please don't have it. You understand? I'd rather tell the story with the lighting design, the cinematography, and every other element, because all these things are supposed to be factual elements of storytelling. So when you take away the emphasis on the lighting design, you could actually see a movie that I've created. And if you're someone who's well versed in lights and colors, you can tell the story from the beginning to the end if the movie is muted. And that's because a lot of attention and detail was put into the lighting design. Same applies to the cinematography. If I wanted to take your attention from one end of the frame to another, all I need to do is rack my focus and put a subtle motion for my camera. And I'm telling you, with that motion, take your attention away from here and cast your mind here. You understand? So those are different tools and different techniques you can use to tell the story beyond dialogue. So there are a lot of things that people say in movies that the cinematography or the lighting design could have just done. Or sometimes, even if not the lighting design, just a body gesture or an expression on the face does the job, because the viewers are not stupid. But we've come to a state in our industry where uh, we've mummified the viewers, and then we have to spoon feed them all the time. So two people are engaged in a fight and they fall into a dark corner, and only one person comes out with blood on his body. Clearly the other guy has been killed or incapacitated.
Yeah.
But then they will need to explain, and he will come out and say, yes, I have killed you. Now you will know that I have killed you. Come on, guy, you're messing it up. The moment that happens, I'm already put off. You
Yeah.
understand? Because again, you are trying to tell me that I'm not intelligent. But of course, you have to excuse some of these guys because they create some of these movies for people who are at that level and who just want to be spoon fed. But again, everybody has his audience. So people who make those movies, kudos to them. But I just will make those kind of movies.
Okay, now there are two key words when it comes to the arts. In fact, culture. You can look at the word context and also look at the word subtext. I can
Hmm.
see that in your movies, even when you're telling a story in context, you add some subtext. That's the subterranean messages that a lot of
Yeah,
movies in Nigeria don't care about.
yeah, because you see again, most of the most successful movies ever made, movies that are very rich in subtext. You understand, and you've realized that there are directors who have carved a niche for themselves by using certain subtext in almost all their movies. You see some movies, and sometimes it's always a circle or a triangle or an angle or a shade or the way things overlap in every scene. You understand what I'm trying to say? And that's even for the very deep ones. But let's even put it at the base level. There are other subtexts that people use. So it's more like it's bringing that is bringing abstract art and stylization
Mhm,
into filmmaking. So you are bringing those elements of art that are meant to, so forms, shapes,
mhm.
textures, light, and their intensity. Everything has a meaning, and that's a very important thing about surrealism. Everything has a philosophy behind it. If anything is in your scene that doesn't have a philosophy behind its existence or its showcase in that scene, then it's a waste of space. It's actually a
Yeah,
waste
you're
of
right. You're
space.
right.
There should be something else there. You understand? So for me, subtext are everything. You understand? Subtext are everything. I made a movie once called Common Man, and there was a scene where the lead actor, he was mourning the death of his friends who died in a fire in an inferno. And there was a scene where he was sitting in the same scene where the friends died in a very mystical, surreal setting, very hazy and foggy and dreamy. And he was sitting down there with fire still burning all around him. And he had a candle lit, and he just stretched forth his hand and he was burning himself with the wax of the candle. And that is like, I could break down into 10 pages, 10 pages of manuscript, just that
Feeling what he
action.
said, feeling what his film was
Exactly.
feeling, without even
Exactly.
saying it, without saying it.
Ex- exactly. You understand? So that is just one direction. So you see how subjective surrealism is. So a surrealist creates a work of art. And that's why when you create a movie from a surrealist point of view, you keep it open ended. So all my movies, I can say this confident, all my movies end in a way that every viewer leaves the hall or the screen or the front of their computer with a very, even though I've created an objective direction for them to go, everybody must live with a subjective